What's going on, everyone? So, Scream 7 is not supposed to be the end for Ghostface. Ghostface will be back in future films based on recent rumors. Now, again, take everything with a grain of salt, but it makes a world of sense. It's something I have talked about heavily. It's something that I've continued to highlight that, like, hey, they'll probably make another 10 if they can. One, the Spyglass and everybody, they spent so much money on the rights to Scream. Yes, it was a whole catalog of things, but Scream was the grand prize. And they need to make their money back and then some off of that. They probably need to make another 3 or 4 movies just to break even on the purchase. So you got to imagine that this isn't going to end anytime soon. Also, there's rumors about the series potentially coming back. That's kind of been in the talks for like a year, 2 years now. Maybe even longer, that rumors are just heavily like, hey, they're going to bring back a series. And with a lot of the talks of all these other horror series and like the success of Chucky and all that, you got to imagine that they're going to at least make the attempt. We'll see what approach they go with that. But it makes sense that you would not have this be the end of the Scream franchise. You could set up and establish new characters, new groundwork, and continue to go forward. Because the beauty of Scream is that it's always someone different, right? It's never the same. It's not a Michael, it's not a Jason, it's not a Freddy, to where it's like, okay, well, once you get rid of them, it's like now you have to find a new creative way to bring them back. No, you could go on forever. And I, for one, am totally okay with that, right? As long as it's a good story, good execution, you have good characters, right? As long as it's not like just a complete blatant cash grab where it's like, this is terrible, right? Like they put zero effort into this. As long as nothing like that, I'm all for it, right? I know a lot of people talk about sequels and all, like, every movie period is a cash grab. So when I say cash grab, I don't mean in the sense of like, well, they're making another Scream 7. Wouldn't that be a cash grab? Well, yeah, but Scream 1 was a cash grab, right? The whole point is to make money. So I'm not talking about that, but you're the clear, blatant, like, you just made this just solely for the money rather than like actually putting the time, effort, and energy to give us a quality film. Just wanted to clarify that. But word is that this film is supposed to have some form of a time jump. Did a whole video on that news. Go check it out after this if you're curious on more. But essentially, they're supposed to have a time jump, which is not new to Scream. Most of the Scream films have had some form of time jumps. Some have been more so just because, like between Scream 3 and Scream 4, and then Scream 4 and Scream 5. But like in between Scream 1 and Scream 2, for example, Scream 2 and Scream 3, there was multiple year time jumps in each of those. So it's not like this far-fetched, out of the realm type thing where it's like, oh, hey, we're going to have this skip, say, 2 years into the future or something, to where it kind of adds up. And then you have the time in between Scream 6 and 7. So now you could, one of the kid in the stroller could be 7 at that point, right? Or older. So that's kind of the idea. And based on the reports, they want to have this kind of be the start of a new trilogy, that they want one of Sydney's children to be older, and she can kind of be more of a bigger role, more of a focal point. This film is supposed to be very Sydney centric, and and I love that though, right? Obviously, look, I've said numerous times that I think at some point they should move off of Sydney. I was okay of them moving off of her after Scream 5. I mean, I didn't like the way and how everything played out, right? I was hoping, it would just kind of be like, hey, you know what, my time is past type thing. But nonetheless, I was okay with her not being in Scream 6. But I understand the circumstances for now, right? You kind of got in this position where it's like, like, we got to figure something out here. And Sydney and Neve Campbell are the safest bet. So good for her. She gets her bag. She gets to, have a little more control. It's a win-win. Right? Now they get to continue to make films. But it makes sense that they're going to establish it with the family. You set up the family dynamic in Scream 5. If you're going to have Sydney back, you got to touch on that. Right? I mean, at some point, it's like, okay, are we ever going to, like, why did you set that up if you're never going to utilize it, if you're never going to use it? Well, if they go with, like, the daughter route, you have an easy transition from Sydney to her daughter, and then that always opens the door and keeps it available for Neve to return, even in just like little small roles if she wanted to, right? Like her dad, for example, right? Would just little cameo appearances here. And like you could do something like that with her daughter and just like have little Easter eggs with Neve and stuff. Like that could be fun. And then also, of course, you could have her in bigger roles if you wanted to. But my guess is that they probably establish and set up Sydney's daughter and maybe some other characters around Sydney, and then they maybe have one more film with Nev and Sydney, and then you start seeing that sort of that separation, right? So I think this one will be like very Sydney focused. Part two, again, assuming that there is, part two would kind of be this like more like, hey, it's still Sydney focused, but it's kind of more like you see a clear direction of moving away. And then you get into the third installment where maybe Sydney's hardly in it, and then you'll get the transition going forward. I wouldn't mind something like that. Get a little more Nev. This is kind of like the full circle trilogy, kind of like what you saw with Halloween, right? Where it's like, here's Laurie, here's the setup, here's like the big brutal film where you start kind of seeing the transition and takeover. Okay, Allison's kind of stepping into the fold a little bit more, and then you get the full film where it's like they set it up to where it's like, okay, Allison's, you could probably do more films with her going forward. It's kind of how I feel about this. It's kind of the direction and idea that I think that they will take. But the idea of just like continuing this story and setting up a new trilogy with Sydney, like, again, I'm all for it as long as it's good storytelling, right? If you're just making films just for the sake of making films, right, and throwing the Scream label on it, like, I'm not a fan of that, right? Look at The Strangers, look at, The Exorcist beginning, or Believer, right? Like, it's just, you look at some of these movies that they are just pumping out and just throwing the franchise tag on. It's just disappointing. It just feels like, what's the point of all of this? So as long as they're still pumping out good films and giving us films of quality, and we feel like, okay, like that was solid, right? Not every film is going to have its holes, its flaws, its issues, its concerns, right? Like I've expressed, I have plenty of concerns with Scream 5 and 6. I have plenty of issues with Scream 5 and 6. No, I'm not the biggest fan of those films, but I don't hate those films. I enjoy them. They're good. I think that they were, I think there were a lot of things that I did like about it. I thought there was a lot of things I did enjoy. I liked, in particular, more than probably anything, I liked that we moved off of the goofy Ghostface. Don't get me wrong. Again, Scream is my favorite horror franchise. I love me some goofy Ghostface, right? Because it's what was the beginning and what was established. But I like to kind of get to a more serious, dark tone, and I thought Scream 5 and 6 really established that and set that up. So to me, I think you can continue that trend, and you continue to kind of just add, little bits and gems along the way. But again, like I like the idea of the family dynamic and really setting up the family dynamic going forward, right? You bring back Sydney, you introduce the family, right? Maybe you kind of have, do they have Kincaid die potentially? I know that sounds crazy, but I mean, think of like if they do kind of go the Laurie route, which maybe I'll dedicate an entire video on, because I think that's a really good talking point in and of itself. But like, if they do kind of do the Laurie arc, it kind of makes sense, right? You saw Karen die, and it's like, do they do something similar? I don't know. It's a possibility, but anyway, as always, this is a discussion. I pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you like that there's going to be more Scream films, or supposed to be? Which, again, I'm very confident that that's the case. I always say, take it with a grain of salt. No, don't just jump to the belief that everything you hear is true. But this is one of the few things that I'm like, I think this is a safe bet, right? And another great example is just the fact that they are rushing out Scream 7 so quickly, right? Like if they were ever going to take a hiatus, if they were ever going to take their time, this would be a good opportunity. This would be a good moment. This would be a good moment to do that, right? Because it's like, okay, we just had this, this disaster off screen where everybody essentially departed, and it's like, okay, well, now what do we do? If you like, you could kind of get away with like, hey, let's take a step back here. So that's the fact that they're trying to pump out Scream 7 so quickly, and they went back to Nev and they gave her what she wanted and all that stuff, tells me that like it's just further confirmation that like, oh no, they're trying to pump. This isn't the end. This is the beginning, right? And in a lot of ways, this might, from a business and just film standpoint, like if you're going to continue to do this, this might be one of the best things that could happen. Because now you kind of got like, okay, you finished the little Sam and Tara story. It didn't end in a way that was awkward or anything. Like it had a nice package here in a bow type ending. And now you're bringing Sydney back, and now you could make 3 more movies where it's like, okay, well, where are you going to pick up, continuing with Sam? I'm sure that they had story. I'm sure that they had direction. But now you got all this new freshness and excitement and stuff. Again, I already feel about the situation. I'm talking about solely from like, they want to make more films. This was it's about as good as an end result as could happen for them, because now people are kind of like, oh, let's see what they do with Sydney and the family. So we'll see how it all plays out. But anyway, again, love to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. Helps me enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.